It's great to be joined today by Ron Fry, a Green Beret, warrior king of the Pech Valley, entrepreneur, and author of the book Hammerhead Six: How Green Berets Waged an Unconventional War Against the Taliban to Win in Afghanistan's Deadly Pech Valley. The book is fascinating, Ron, and it's such a pleasure to be speaking with you today. I think when most people learn about the tactics and strategies employed by the American military in the Middle East, they hear more about strategies that are not what you were involved in when you were in the Pech Valley. So talk to us a little bit about your deployment there and what you did.
Great. Well, hey, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
Um, you know, right after the Taliban fell in 2001, 2002 timeframe, there's this big power vacuum, and we're trying to help this country get on its feet. There's still pockets of Al Qaeda and Taliban that are in the area. When my team got deployed there, we were in the Kunar province, which the history of the war would show was the hottest part of the fight, or the most difficult place to fight. And we were just trying to figure it out. There was only a few boots on the ground, and we just got this unique mission that there was this valley where they knew Al Qaeda was operating. They knew that there was Taliban operatives. There was all kinds of cartels and other people in this valley, and we got the job to go into the valley and attempt to win the people over and deny the enemy sanctuary in that valley. And that's the essence of what our mission was. And so we had to, like you alluded to, we couldn't take the heavy-handed approach of going in there with 1,000 men and trying to force these people to either work with us or submit to us. We actually had to go out there and win them over. And, people talk about hearts and minds, but we actually had to go there and make friends and recruit soldiers from the local people to actually work with us.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the sort of day-to-day, maybe even some of the mundane stuff that you had to sort of learn and integrate and live within in order to start to be accepted into the community?
Yes, the huge advantage we had is when we showed up, all the American soldiers they'd seen before were clean-shaven, young, uniformed soldiers.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden you have these older Americans that have beards, that are kind of wearing some local clothes, that are willing to talk to the shopkeeper, that are buying, our Pepsis and stuff on the local economy. So immediately when we got there, there was about a 2-week honeymoon period where they thought these new Americans were Muslim. They kind of accepted us immediately and were like, okay, these guys are different. And then, that kind of wore off, and then it was like we actually had to do our job. But, on a day-to-day basis, I was trying to run a camp. So I've got some Marines that are working with us, my team, some Afghans. They weren't mercenaries, but they were working for us. And, we had to deal with the day-to-day where you had people bringing their kids up that needed medical care. We had people working on the camp doing labor. We had Afghan soldiers that we were working with, that we were training. And then probably 5 or 6 times a day, I would get called down to the local district leader's house and either, adjudicate some dispute between villages or make a decision with a contractor. It was like we were running almost like the mayor's office of this valley, and we're supposed to be, the strength and I was considered like the local warlord, but at the same time, I was their guest, and I was kind of helping them with their local politics, where some of the disputes they had, they couldn't fix themselves. They needed a third party to come in and basically be the referee.
What was the
But it
language
was
situation? How was the communication happening on a day-to-day basis?
So all special forces teams have language skills. Unfortunate thing, my team was an Asian team. So we had like 8 different Asian languages, but nobody spoke Pashtun.
Hmm.
So we had a couple of key interpreters that had been vetted by the CAA before, and they just would help us with all the translating.
Can you sort of relate or maybe give us an analogy to, so for people who don't know your background, you went to Brigham Young, you spent 2 years as a missionary for the Mormon Church in France and Switzerland.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how, well, number one, how that experience related directly to your work in the Pech Valley, but also maybe ways in which it was drastically different, what you were doing there and what you were doing as a Mormon missionary?
Yeah, it's a great question. As a Mormon missionary in Switzerland, most missionaries in other parts of the world, they do a lot of humanitarian aid. Both my brothers served their missions in Chile, And about half the time, they were doing more Peace Corps type stuff as opposed to direct service for the church. In Switzerland and France, I got to meet a ton of Muslims, people from every different faith, and we got to do service. We also got to do proselyting, but I got a real understanding of the world is a big place. There's a lot of different ideologies, a lot of different people, a lot of different thoughts, and spent a lot of time listening to people, hearing their life stories, hearing what was driving them. And I felt when we were in Afghanistan, that skill set was directly transferable in the fact that these people want to be heard. They want to know that whatever decision you're making or for whatever reason you're there, that you understand where they're coming from, whether that's what they want their government to do, what they don't want the U.S. military to do, the goals they have for their kids, etc. The ability to listen and actually take their point of view into account was directly transferable. What wasn't was you do that during the day, and then at night when you get intel that the enemy is doing something in another place, and then you strap on the guns and go there looking for a fight. That was not directly transferable. The people skills, that was transferable, but that was really the difference. Sometimes I felt like I was more like a missionary during the day, and then when bullets would start flying, then you switch right back into Green Beret or Army mode.
When you see the discussions that happen currently in media among elected officials that relate to whether it's ISIS or really any other group or area where there could be a potential military incursion by the United States or a joint group of the United States and allies, is there anything that, based on your experience in the Pech Valley, you find to be just sort of fundamentally missing from either the understanding of what will need to be done in order to root out the ideology of a group like ISIS, or the tactics and strategies? Are you seeing that there's anything in particular missing from discussions?
The thing that I see that is in place is in Syria. We do have right now, the focus is having special forces work with the Kurds and rebel groups, etc. That part is somewhat encouraging. What you see missing is the fundamental understanding of what these people want, not our enemy, but the people we're trying to coordinate with. The conflict in that part of the world between Shia and Sunni, between the different nation states, that's been going on forever. And I don't know that we take into account the fact that when we come in there to solve a problem that we see as our problem, are we galvanizing those people to now join hands and fight against the foreigners? Or are we actually leveraging, the moderate friendly side, if we can identify what that is, against the side, that is a common enemy. Because you do have the moderates, you do have the reasonable people over there that are fighting against the violent jihadists that are also trying to take over those nation states. And in some ways, when we talk about killing ISIS, well, destroying this gang of guys doesn't solve the long-term problem. We'll create another vacuum, or just another group will pop up. So I'm hopeful that there'll be more discussion about a more holistic approach of, holistic's not the word I'm looking for, but a comprehensive strategy for the Middle East, not just, hey, the next 18 months against ISIS. And I don't know that the last few administrations that there's been a real comprehensive Middle East strategy.
You mentioned something that's been a discussion we've been having for many years on this program, which is if we can identify who the so-called good guys are or who our best ally is. The U.S. has a very long history of arming and ultimately fighting against groups that we armed who still have the weapons we armed them with. So as someone who has actually been there doing this type of work, talk to us about some of the pragmatic difficulties day to day in identifying so-called good guys, not at the 30,000 foot level of countries or large groups, but even within something like the Pech Valley where you worked.
Yeah, no, and it's very, especially with the American society, we're a microwave society. We expect everything really quick. Creating relationships that are going to work with us long term, sometimes we're really impatient. If it seems like this guy's enemy is our enemy, then we'll work with him and destroy that enemy. Next thing you know, we've just empowered someone that's even worse. And in the Pech Valley was no different. It was difficult when somebody would come with intel on the Al-Qaeda guy, or, hey, we think this village over here has Taliban, to really vet through, are they actually wanting me to help them destroy their enemy, or are they giving me intel about a common enemy? And more often than not, there'd be a blood feud or a village that was fighting against another village, that just came to us and to tell us that their enemy was the Taliban or Al Qaeda. And it's very tempting to strap on the guns and go fight what we perceive as being our enemy, and to get pulled into a trap where we're just participating in a blood feud. So we would really just take patience, and we would like try and gather more intel around the people that were proposing to share with us. Sometimes we'd find out that they were genuine. These are people that had been friends of the Afghan government in the past. They were reasonable, they were moderate, they were giving us fair intel. And other times we just found out that these were guys who were just trying to, get the drop on their enemy and use us as the strong man.
Mm.
So, but I think in all of these conflicts, and this is the nature of unconventional warfare, you need guys on the ground that are willing to take the time and the effort to try and get to know who these people actually are, not just so we can accomplish what we're trying to do in the next year or two, but so that we know all the players on the ground for a long-term strategy, so that 30 years from now, we have a cadre of friends and allies that we've got a long history with, so that what happened on 9/11 doesn't. I mean, 9/11, we'd walked away from Afghanistan for 10 years and we didn't have a good idea of who was where, what was what, who was our friend, and that created part of the problem.
We've been speaking in part about the experiences that Ron Fry discusses in his book Hammerhead Six, how Green Berets waged an unconventional war against the Taliban to win in Afghanistan's deadly Pech Valley. We have been speaking with the book's author, Ron Fry, Green Beret. Thank you so much for talking to us about this. Super interesting.
Thank you.